and Friday at 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and audio and video on Facebook Live, Periscope, Twitch, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This is where we discuss no bullshit, 100% real, raw, and unfiltered life-changing advice on life, entrepreneurship, personal development, family, tech, and marketing. My name is Ivan Temelkov, and of course, I'm your host. And today, I am joined by String Nguyen. Was that correct? Did I pronounce that correctly?
No, but good try. It's you win, we all win. You
Right,
win.
that's what it is.
That's
So
okay.
it's been a long time. Actually, String was let's see, we did a podcast together, what, probably a couple of years ago, I think. Or we did some kind of
What?
a live or something, I believe, a couple of years ago.
That's crazy how things happen in the last couple of years. Because I think we
Right?
talked about Meerkat at that time, didn't we? We were really big
Yes.
about it, but
Oh
that's
my goodness. No, it's been actually more than a couple of years because didn't the Facebook Live technically kill Meerkat, so to speak, kind of?
Twitter did and Periscope. And look at Periscope now. It kind of died this year as well.
Well, ironically enough, is speaking of Periscope, I believe that as of March 1st or March 21st, Periscope is going away.
I know. That's why it's like it's going to die anyway. And
Right.
the funny thing was, like, I actually monetized on Meerkat using Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
There are people messaging me now. It's like, String, I can't access this account anymore. It's like, dude, they closed that account because Airbnb bought ChangeTip
Mm-hmm.
2 years later. So it's kind of crazy what has happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we jump into and kind of take it way back to your early days, I just want to do a quick intro about you so, viewers and listeners know who you are and what you've done. So, after 10 plus years in growth and marketing space, now you're the founder of the Trusted Voice, and what you're doing is developing tools to empower professionals and entrepreneurial folks to be a trusted voice. So, some of your wins being on LinkedIn since the late 2017 is that you've gone from 0 to 65,000 followers, 4 times top voice out of 670 million professionals, and now considered to be the top 400 creators worldwide. You've monetized your audience, growth and expertise, developed your startup, the Trusted Voice. First of all, congratulations on all your success. Those are just
Yes.
amazing, amazing accolades. But before we talk about LinkedIn, and I know Clubhouse was something that we mentioned before we hit record, let's go way, way, way back and let's talk about your early days. Let's talk about a little bit about your childhood and growing up and how did you get into the digital space? That's what I'm curious about knowing.
Well, I always start with my mum because she gives you context about who I am and what drives me today.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a refugee from Vietnam, escaped the war from Vietnam and went to Australia. So she was a single mom too that brought up 5 kids. So I happened to be the second kid. And I always tell this story where she's super resourceful. She couldn't afford childcare, but she'd chuck us in the library every day and pick us up there. So the library, the local library became our place. My Google, my Merc, my ICQ, my Facebook group. Like it's kind of like just where I just hang out and hanged out with Sigmund Freud almost every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's like where my thirst for knowledge came from, and I realized that I always try to book the internet as much as I can. I see it empty, my brothers and I will fight over it,
Mm-hmm.
literally. And I feel like the library has given me that basis for to keep doing what I need to do. And my mum jokes around and says like, if you read too much, you get crazy. And I'm like thinking, even to this day, she looks at me a little bit crazy as well because she doesn't quite understand what I do. But she
Yeah.
just knows that I get to travel around the world, do what I love, and make money from it as well. So it's like, oh, you make money from it now. In the early
Right.
days, my I graduated and did all the things that my mum wanted me to do, which was like was the first one to graduate as an interior designer, and I did it for her more than for me.
Yeah.
And but it made her happy, and everyone's like, "Why didn't you just get a really good job?" So they look at me a little bit like crazy. You probably have that, right, Ivan? Because I remember reading your
Oh, yeah.
Facebook group
Oh, yeah,
messages.
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I wanted you to start out actually because I guess sort of the foundation of the RAS project has always been bringing people with interesting stories such as yourself, and a lot of these stories really have ethnical backgrounds. So being an immigrant, there's been a lot of immigrants on this show, sure, that have gone through the rags to riches, transformation, so to speak. But it was so ironic when you were saying that, because yeah, I did go through that. I lived a life based on the expectations of my family. Like you said, you went to school to become an interior designer because you wanted to fulfill an expectation that your mom had. It wasn't an expectation that you had. And I think in the entrepreneurial space, this, you've been in it for quite a while as well, as is that, especially if you come from an immigrant family, I feel like you're living the life of someone else, usually your parents, because they're an older generation and they have such huge, aspirations for you, but those aspirations aren't your own. And it was so interesting when you said that you spent a lot of time in the library. So self-taught, right? You basically
Mm-hmm.
self-taught yourself everything that you know. And let's face it, if you know how to use a computer, use Google, and you're a little bit resourceful, you can do that nowadays. But I think in that older generation, like your mom and my parents, also is this that that wasn't available. The internet wasn't available, and so I think it was different. Not to mention is that the cultural aspect really differentiated. But so you went to school, you became an interior designer, and then you realized that what, this is a life this is not my life. This is my
Well,
mom's life.
oh, it wasn't even that. Like, I'm very I love my mum a lot, but I think the biggest turning point when we lost my brother,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like the breaking point for me specifically. And then like I felt also because like there's I felt my voice was being squished by society, by being a female, being Asian, being Australian. Ironically, Australians have a thing against people doing super well.
Wow,
They're like,
really? Well, that's a first.
there's a concept called tall poppy syndrome where they just cut
Mm-hmm.
you when you grow, and they like to cut the stalks of the flowers so that you topple down. And I think it's been ingrained into us, but also British people don't like bragging as well.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and Asian people, like it's all about being humble. But there's a way
Sure.
of being, showcasing your accomplishment with impact and with confidence, but you don't have to brag about it. Like, look at there's ways of flexing without
Yep.
flexing, I think. And I had to like find my way of doing it. And I was able to do that and I realized like if I had to achieve what I needed to achieve, I just had to do it myself. I can't rely on others to create that path. And
Yep.
along the way, I noticed that, uh, String, how did you get started? What did you do to grow on LinkedIn? Like, it's because I found my voice and was super authentic about it and myself, that people
Yeah.
want to do that as well. So it's just like they see aspects of me in them. And that's why I created the startup called the Trusted Voice, to help people be that trusted voice
Yeah.
online, because the analog, like the public speaking is not available anymore. So they had
Yeah.
to transfer the knowledge and expertise and authority online. And they realized that being a creator online is also a way to grow their audience and establish their authority.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, I want to talk more about LinkedIn and how you built your voice, because you truly do have a unique voice. I think in part it was probably because of the vulnerability and really just, investing in yourself. But it's really interesting. I want to go back to for a second just to round out the thought of, because I'm an immigrant also, and I can totally relate to that point in time when I thought that, okay, I need to deal with my parents, So I dropped out of college. My parents were like, oh, that's not good. You would have been the first one to graduate from college. But it's like, well, that was the life that you wanted me to live. For me, college was boring. I was off, dicking around on Google and searching and doing all kinds of other stuff. So I think it's important, and I really want to shift the conversation towards you in just a second, but I think it is very important to find your voice, who you are, because after all, you're living for yourself and nobody else. And it's so ironic that we're talking about finding your voice. And I know you've done this on LinkedIn. Recently, someone said something to me. They said, the one person that you spend the most amount of time in your life is yourself. So wouldn't you want to do what you want to do in your life and not do it for everybody else? And I just got it really got me thinking. I'm like, yeah, that is so true. You got to live your own life. So You started out 2017 on LinkedIn, and I know you did a bunch of different things. I've been following you for a while. In fact, you're always popping in my feed, on LinkedIn. And but how did you get started in finding your voice? Like, what did you do?
It, I think we have to bring back Meerkat to this conversation
Sure.
because Meerkat was where I literally pushed myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're finding your voice or sharing your voice, whether it be here with your head, your knowledge, or your heart, which is the vulnerability part. And we have to have the conversation about ego versus vulnerability or like victimhood, because
Sure.
that's what a lot of immigrants or like all families with like that kind of background have. We have a lot of victimhood in us, and then the trauma that we carry of our parents. So
Mm-hmm.
let's have that conversation too, because I feel like that's something to delve into, and a lot of people
Yeah.
don't really unpack that as part of their journey of finding their voice, right? And people, so it started on Meerkat, and I'm doing the same thing that I did on Meerkat, which is like growing a community, sharing knowledge, and rocking up and showing up. It's kind of the same thing that everyone does. Like the only difference is that you and I are more of a creator thinker, where we
Yeah.
rock up and create volume of content. But through the volume of content, we didn't seek perfection, but we seek progress. And we use that tool, the mechanism to find our voice to gain confidence in the way we articulate and communicate. And a lot of
Right.
people like overthink. We're like, you and I are overthinkers, but we just overthink out loud now
Mm.
using video.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. Like you and I just happen to use live stream as a mechanism to practice and communicate properly and effectively. And and ironically, finding your voice is a journey about being a better human, being a
Oh,
better
that's
version of being a better version of ourselves, right?
yeah.
That's
You
what
know, one thing I wanted to mention that you said about video is that, at least for me, I know is when I started doing video, it's been a while since I started doing this, but I think it was more about sharing my story in a form of expression also. But you made a really good point about that. And I would love to hear more thoughts around that in the way that you specifically have done it. Because one thing that I really resonate with, kind of what you're doing, is that I think there was a huge component of vulnerability, like you said, you really, like with Meerkat, like you really started putting yourself out there. Let's face it, the reality of things is most people are frightened to get on video. Literally, it's almost like a death sentence to people, believe it or not. Just be like, no, 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 I don't want somebody to record me. Or when they hit record, it's like they just draw a blank, you know?
yes, yes. And it's the same thing. I think video has the same barriers as public speaking.
Yeah, yeah,
And people are scared of public speaking more than death itself, apparently.
exactly. So you started just to go back. So you started to put yourself out there. This was obviously in the, oh my god, 4 years ago maybe. Has it been longer when
Five,
Meerkat?
five.
5 years ago. 5 years ago. That, oh my fucking god, that's insane. Like time just, that was actually a year into when I started my business. That's crazy. So that seems so long ago. Okay, so Meerkat, you started to put yourself out there, but what I want to know is the psychology, your psychology behind what was rationalizing in your mind when you were like, okay, Meerkat, I'm going to use Meerkat, put myself out there. What was going through your mind? How were you processing this?
There was two. I'm very technical and strategic, but I was still dealing with my ego or my barriers of imposter syndrome within me at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, that happens. That's a very normal journey that everyone goes through, and I
Mm-hmm.
probably normalize it, but that's because like I done the hard yards, and I have to grapple with people recognize me on the streets, but they don't say hello. It's like,
Right.
hey, I saw you down the street. They like I remember like going to San Francisco on the first day, and someone's like, hey, I saw you walking down the street, and for like 1 week I grappled with that thing. It's like, why didn't they say hi? What was
Right.
that? And it was like, do I want to deal with fame? And then I realized that I had all these complexities about recognition as well.
Yeah.
So that was like I have to say, Meerkat allowed me to fly over to San Francisco and meet one of my champions. And now for 6 months, I
Yeah.
stayed rent free on in San Francisco in the middle of CBD, like learning about startup life. And that only
Yeah.
happened because of Meerkat, because I had to put myself out there. And I didn't go out there to say, hey, I'm going to San Francisco and be global. I just like, no, I did not think like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unpacking to do with unraveling about who you want to be and how to be a big
Yeah.
thinker. And I remember the psychology of the first year of Meerkat, where I just like, oh, I felt like a nobody trying to be a somebody.
Mm, okay, a couple of things you mentioned that I want to actually expand upon. One, you said ego. It's so interesting you said that because when people actually realize that they have an ego problem, but in a bad way, like ego is a good thing because I think it's a confidence thing, but I
Mm-hmm.
think ego like in a bad way, like, hey, I'm somebody, like they say, talk to the janitor in the same way you talk to the CEO. Like having that kind of mentality is huge. So the fact that you talk,
Actually,
go ahead.
actually, the, the way to talk to CEOs is talk like they're a janitor, and the way to talk to the janitor is like to talk to them like a CEO.
That's a
That's a
really
better.
good point. Yeah. Well, you said that, and it really got me thinking because I've gone through that in the past. It was like, I want to be somebody, but I've got such an inflated ego, and this was probably my 20s, I think. And then like I think it just took time really to like taper that off and realize that like really need to figure out who you are. Like you said, you went to San Francisco, spent 6 months. They're trying to figure out startup life, trying to figure out like who do you want to become. And it was because of Meerkat, because you put yourself out there. When we live in a world where most people don't put themselves out there, they're afraid to put themselves out there. But even more so, and I think we're going in this direction with this conversation, is that okay, you're putting yourself out there, but then at what point did you realize that hey, vulnerability is a selling thing? Because that's what you did, right?
Yeah, and I think I had a really strong self awareness from a young age. It's
Hmm.
probably because of being an immigrant, and I realized like society was against me. That's
Yeah.
victimhood, by the way. But I did feel like there was like these pathway that was much easier for a certain type of people to go through because they had more resources and passes
Yeah.
in life. And but I was given this, but I also recognized that people kept on lifting me up. So recognizing your champions early on
Yeah.
and appreciating them, because when they say, "How can I help you?" or "What can I do?" you have to articulate what your purpose is and your goal is for people to lift you up. If you don't have any purpose, why should they lift you up? Because that's a waste of their resources and time.
Yeah.
That's a disrespect of what they achieved as well.
One thing I want to mention as we're talking about this, just to bring it full circle for viewers and listeners, is that we're talking about how you built a voice on LinkedIn. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up too is just that most people are like, well, LinkedIn is a business network, really, and you shouldn't get vulnerable and personal on it. Bullshit, says who?
Says you, the 4 times LinkedIn top voice who happens to do
Exactly.
fried chicken. And this is just me just saying, hey, I
Yep.
achieved this by being myself. I dropped the mask because there is only one mask or
Yeah.
one brain, one person, one me. It's like, why do I have to fake it or pretend
Yeah.
by being someone else online? I am me. And for you to do business with me, I'd rather like just use that as a filter. And I've created and worked with really established brands just by being
Yeah.
me. Okay, the vulnerability part, it comes with the ego, and I think if I need to like share this triangle, and I keep forgetting the name of it, but this will help a lot of listeners deal with their ego
Sure.
and how to be authentic. So this is triangle, and in the middle of the triangle, we have the word ego, and each point has like certain keywords. One point has the word victimhood, and then you know what victimhood is like,
Yeah.
woe is me, life is against me.
Right.
Yeah. And the second one is savior. Like you have the Jesus complex. You know this when people go to third world countries and go to orphanage and save them.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's the persecutor. And I think the Capitol Theater or the Capitol Rampage is a of the certain types of persecution because like they feel like people freedom of speech is being impinged. So they're
Yeah.
like, oh, you're get if you don't believe in our philosophy or our religion, you're against us.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, you see it. You see that all
Yes.
these are ego. These are like what I call toxic behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that loves and thrives on drama. And you know, an ex-president happens to be very much knows how to like play this drama.
Yeah.
Okay, and the opposite, there's a mirror. You're like this. It's like, what is the opposite of ego? In the same triangle, or the opposite of triangle, is the authenticity word. Authentic.
Right.
To be authentic, you need to be vulnerable. To be authentic, you need to have boundaries and definitions. Be assertive. So you need to be assertive,
Yeah.
vulnerable, and have a winning attitude.
You know, I want to okay, I want to unpack what you just said because it is so powerful. And mind you, we're talking about LinkedIn here. We'll get into Clubhouse in just a minute, but we're talking about LinkedIn. And you said vulnerable, which, mind you, so when you said vulnerable and then you said authentic, right? Also, and also being driven and committed as well, is just that it's an attestament to what I've done on LinkedIn in part that has resulted in building relationships, business relationships, but not just any relationships, because as you know this as well, we do business with people we like and trust, right? So you have to be likable. You got to have character and personality. You got to have, some banter. You got to have some humor. Maybe some sarcasm too, and connect with people like that. Now that's the beauty about LinkedIn. It allows you to do that, especially now with LinkedIn Live, as I know that you have it. Is a lot of people are not quite leveraging it for that vulnerability and that authenticity factor, because that is little. And I'll give you a prime example. I mean, this was actually, was it last year or the year before, when I was on LinkedIn, and every single day I was putting out one new video. It was talking about my experiences, my failures in business, just being really vulnerable, but really just storytelling for the most part. Now, I had set it as a goal for me to actually push one new video every single day, regardless. Mind you, none of these videos were getting like any comments or likes or anything. Like here and there, some of my trickle, oh, that's a great message, Ivan, this and that. So 4 months go by and mostly crickets until one day I get a direct message from Kristen. Kristen happens to work at a fairly large healthcare startup right here in St. Louis. And the message says, Ivan, love your videos, love how raw and real you are. I've Googled you. I know you're authentic. I know what you've done. Can you come in and talk to us about some digital stuff with one of the 5 partners? Long story short, I ended up doing 20 grand in revenue in 3 months with them. Why?
Mm.
Because I just kept pushing video for 4 months. And so, mind you, when most people were like, Ivan, this is a waste of fucking time. You're pushing these videos. Nobody's watching these videos. Nobody gives a shit. Right.
Nah, people do watch. We have more lurkers out there
Yep.
respecting you, Ivan, because they
Yep.
can't do it themselves. And I think the vulnerability part is actually you have to set boundaries because or know you are. And it comes back to LinkedIn and Clubhouse actually, because it's the same thing.
Yep.
Because different
Yep.
format, but same formula,
Yep.
right? Which is how to be vulnerable, but to be vulnerable, you need to know who you are and set the boundaries.
Yep. Yep.
And your boundaries is like, you don't want to. There's this thing that I'm seeing a lot happening on Clubhouse where people are transferring the trauma over.
Right. Right.
I think it's and they think it's called storytelling. No, that's transfer. That's trauma dumping.
Right.
And because there was no end, there's nothing because everyone's been pushing them down. But where's like the thing that pull you back up?
Right.
And you sharing your failures because there is a reason. It's because for people to avoid it, or there's like a light at the end of that tunnel as well. So that's the winning
Yeah.
attitude that we need to pull people up, right?
You know what I
If you push,
realized
go
in
ahead.
that one thing I wanted to mention. I'm sorry, that was my phone that was actually ringing. One thing that I actually realized in what you just said, because you actually affirmed the fact that it's not true that you're wasting time posting videos on LinkedIn, right? But you know what I realized in that 4 month exercise is that how many people were judgmental of me.
Many.
And so he suddenly actually helped me weed out all the crap and all the bullshit and all the haters, so to speak, that were like, nah, this is a waste of time, Ivan. You shouldn't do this. When in fact, what people, now the right people that would actually, like you said, pay you money because in exchange of value, Not to mention is that by that time, they've gotten to know you through the videos. It's almost like this because you're exposing yourself that I didn't need to be known by everybody. I just needed to be known by somebody, by one person. That's it.
That's relevant. Yeah, and I think
Exactly.
if you resonate with the right people, video's voice has gives out this frequency of conviction and your character.
Hmm.
That's why I love it, because if you heard me 5 years ago, uh, and you haven't heard me and talked to me since then, do you feel like I've changed or grown since that last conversation?
Well, I'll tell you this, String. And a lot of people don't know about this about me because there's been a huge evolution over the last probably 3 years. For me as a person, I'm a father now. I have a 40-year-old. I have a 2-year-old also. I'm also obviously married. I went from 2017 being bankrupt to 2020. I made over six figures with my business, but it was a mental shift for me. It was a huge mental shift for me that really changed. But to answer your question is, I think the way that you present yourself absolutely speaks to the fact that I think there's been a transformation in the way that you perceive everything. Because I'm a firm believer, this is at least me, and some of my mentors like Ed Milet and Andy Frisella have talked about this, that when you change your mind, everything is mindset. Literally everything is mindset. Is so, for example, it's snowing outside right now. So I could literally sit here and be like, oh fuck, it's such a crappy day outside, I'm in a bad mood, I'm not going to get anything done. Or I'm going to say, I'm going to conquer Monday, I'm going to fucking get everything done that's on my to-do list, right? So it's all about perception, it's all about mindset. So I think your mindset has evolved, and that's what has helped you reach these milestones that you have accomplished. But for me personally, is I'm that person that really truly tries to get to know people at the heart level specifically, because what I've found is that those are the people that I've actually aligned to do business with. In fact, and so I think there's definitely been, to answer your question, I think there's been a transformation. Again, I haven't paid much attention to a lot of your content online, but my intuition is telling me that I think you've gone through a mindset shift, and maybe even several for that matter, that has really given you, I don't know if necessarily it's epiphanies, but it has really given you a stronger purpose, a stronger why for why you're doing things. Because for me, my why is my family. That's my why. That's why I do everything. I want to create opportunities for my kids that I didn't have growing up as an immigrant. I want to create
Mm.
opportunities to where they can have ultimate freedom when they get to be an age. And that's why I do what I do. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do, but my why, and I believe as an entrepreneur, you got to have a why and you got to have a purpose. Why are
I
you
do, I
doing it?
do,
Because that's your motivator.
I do. And to tell the truth, like I always think about my nieces and my nephew, because like I don't
Mm-hmm.
have kids, but I'm always thinking about, I wish they didn't. How can I make a better future for them? Because at the day, in the day, these are tools and tactics that I want to like
Yeah.
surpass generations.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Going back to LinkedIn though, because I want to bring this full circle, because what we're talking about here are mindset shifts, at least from what I'm hearing from you, that has attributed to you, becoming a four-time top voice, 0 to 65,000 followers on LinkedIn. When I think too many people, especially in the digital space and marketing, look at everything so from a quantitative standpoint, right? Now you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the reason you've been able to have these accomplishments is because you set ego aside, you figured out who you are, you figured out your voice, and then you told the world about it, right?
I think so, because I'm hitting that sore point, right? They always come and ask me the same questions. And funny enough, they think it's monetization, but it's a totally different thing. I remember like going through my business and I thought it was video, and then I thought it was branding. Then it keeps on going back to the like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
purpose.
Yep.
It's just it's just like the fundamentals of being a human. And we being on video, being on LinkedIn, being on Clubhouse, they're just mechanisms for us to be better humans or better communicators, right? And a lot of people don't know how
Yeah.
to articulate what's happening here, or they think it's all about people pay for here. But if you don't know how to like have heart to heart conversations or being just yourself, there's always going to be that trust factor. It's like, can I trust this person
Yeah.
at the end of the day? Right. And there's always going to be people competing for, because when you think about it, you and I do marketing, right?
Yeah.
They chose you because they like Ivan. And it's like, I know Ivan. They
Yeah.
chose me because there's like String has able to accomplish something that I want to accomplish, but she did it
Yeah.
authentically. How did she do that? So I just think people just want to be better humans. And at the end of the day, we just want to be better humans. How can we be better humans?
Yeah.
Because at the moment, there's a lot of like shit going on right now. A lot of people going through depression.
Yeah.
Unemployment is hot skyrocketing, and people are
Yeah.
questioning their life. Depression is on the rise. Suicide
Yeah.
is going to be on the rise. So what do we need to do to give that people these purpose where they feel like they could translate? You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm onto something, but I'm just think there's like a bigger reason why we're here now. Like the systems that exist doesn't work anymore.
I love that, String. I love that. And then I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. Honestly, I also believe you're here on the show because you were meant to come on the show. But what you said actually, something similar happened to me recently. It actually helped me win a new client. So it's actually someone that I work out with every week. It's actually a group of guys, and it's a local group. You know, we get put through the ringer. But one of the guys owns a roofing company that does about a half a million per year. He has a 10-person crew. He's been doing it for 20 years. But after the workout, me and him, started talking a little bit about religion. We started talking about life and just really got into an in depth conversation. I'm like, fuck yes, I loved in depth conversation. It's just who I am as a person. Long story short, as I found out that he was having like all these struggles that he was going through, and then that segued into like, man, I'm not happy with this marketing provider that's like I'm paying money because business and life, I mean, they're correlated because he's been doing roofing for 20 years and he's the best in the areas because he's passionate about it. He's not just doing it for money, he's passionate about it. Next thing I know is he invites me into a new home that he just purchased. We're just sitting down talking about, well, here's what I'm paying for and here's what's working, what's not working. Next thing I know is this is a $1,500 per month client starting out just for social marketing services. But like you said, it's that emotional connection because I think people buy based on emotion. Like you said, likability. Why do people like String? Because String does XYZ, because String makes me feel a certain way. String listens to me, connects with me. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's really what you've done on LinkedIn. You've just storytelled it over and over and over and over. And now you're doing it also on Clubhouse, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm repeating the same messaging, but Clubhouse has given me the space to go deeper. And
Mm-hmm.
now, like,
Yeah.
I feel like LinkedIn was just showing the surface of like what I achieved. So I haven't really. My mum is really intuitive. It's like you need to be more open. I was like, I don't open enough, mum. It's like no, you need to be go more open. So Clubhouse has given me that space to go more open and have these conversations because
Yeah.
I realize ego. People don't know how to deal with their ego or other people's ego.
Yeah.
And to be authentic, we need to learn how to deal with these egos, ourselves and others as well.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues I think in the digital marketing space is because I see this in my social streams every day. I'm heavy on Instagram these days and Facebook also, and LinkedIn is it. I feel like let's just say we have a love hate relationship, but I'm doing it. But I see all these digital marketers that are literally just cold calling, just pitching. Like we can fix your marketing, we can do this and this, and I think that's probably so me. It's similar to what you said. Is that storytelling? I think is so important in the digital space because it builds that rapport with people. It gives them. It suddenly makes you a top of mind because you're different. You have a unique story to tell. You've got a why. You've got a purpose. You can connect with people. Most important is you can solve a problem by, and for me at least from what I found, is leading with education. Is okay. Business owner has a problem. Okay, here's how I would fix that problem. You're giving them education, and you're doing that on LinkedIn and Clubhouse and I was actually surprised that I scored a project on Clubhouse by just reaching out to someone and giving perspective.
But that's because like people are more open there. There are high
Right.
level conversations, high level people there, and they're there because they want to look for an answer. So they
Right.
whereas LinkedIn, I feel like people because of the shitty spams and the attitude, like people are more closed. Whereas like
Mhm.
there's an open door mentality happening inside Clubhouse.
That's true. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Clubhouse. I know we chatted a little bit about LinkedIn. So are you cross pollinating between like LinkedIn and Clubhouse, and what are you doing on Clubhouse? What has proven to work for you? And I know that one of the things that you mentioned actually in the notes is that growing a community is like that next level that in digital and marketing that entrepreneurs that are in that space need to embrace. So let's talk about that, and what are you doing specifically that has proven to be successful?
I'm um, finding my voice again. I'm going back to basics.
Okay.
Why? Because I want to know if I'm resonating. Every time there's a new platform, I use that as a sandpit experiment to see if I could grow really fast.
Okay.
And and it is working, to tell the truth. Like because I had that conviction and I have that expertise and I have that voice, I just went out there and put myself out there again. If anything, I feel like Clubhouse is a South by Southwest, super unorganized, but audio version only.
Right.
And if you go to conferences, you go like, hey, nice to meet you. I have a question. I know you're an expert at this. Can you tell me blah blah blah? Because like people love asking really relevant questions.
Yeah.
That's that's all I do is just ask questions. But when I'm moderating a room, I provide succinct value as much as I can in an actionable way. And a lot of times I notice like a lot of people will fluff around,
Yeah.
but it's a good way to like articulate your communication in a way because even though you answer one person's question, you're actually answering everyone's question in that room.
Yeah. That's really good. Interesting. So the reason I asked the question is because I was actually kind of surprised when you said going back to basics, because I think the technology part is probably the easiest thing to figure out, at least for most people. Like, how do I navigate Clubhouse? Well, a little trial and error, and you can probably figure it out, at least for the most somewhat tech savvy people. But okay, you figure it out. But what do I do now on Clubhouse?
Raise your
Right?
hands, ask questions, set up rooms,
Right.
join multiple communities that you feel like you could resonate with and contribute to
Mm-hmm.
contribute as well. So I joined the marketing one, like they run Marketing Mondays, and it's just like a long Q&A that goes for hours. Like people just sharing knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
helping one person at a time and giving them as much insights as their time. It could be overwhelming sometimes, but it works. Second one
Sure.
is like the LinkedIn community, the WOC community, and the Asian American or Asian professional communities. So I'm tapping into these networks and just like floating around and saying hello to them
Yeah.
and providing high value as well. And if I feel like I need to have the offline conversations, I go offline and contribute and provide continually provide that high level, high value conversation offline as well.
Yeah.
And it's and I've been able to grow like I've only been like 4 6 weeks and it's up to like 3,000 followers now.
Wow.
Yeah, and
So.
it's so it works. Like the techniques that
Mhm.
I work is like being vulnerable, being valuable and assertive, but also I became like a dope moderator because people like when they rock in my room, they know that they go have high
Yeah.
value.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, since we're talking about Clubhouse and not being such a fresh platform. What are some tips that you could give besides, like you said, well, you figure out the tech. Now what? It's like, okay, well, I go in and, participate in star rooms. Great. People figure that out. But are there any specific tactical things that you have done other than, being in a room for 2 hours and draining your iPhone battery, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the obvious one, but is there certain contextual messaging, like the way you story tell? Because you said you went back to basics, but I'd love to hear like some things that you've done, for viewers and listeners that are maybe just getting to Clubhouse, like what are some not so basic, but more like advanced strategies that you could do, to really help you build that following?
One, position yourself really clearly.
Okay.
If you want to be the go-to LinkedIn marketer, you should be really clear and it's like, hey, I'm a go-to LinkedIn marketer. So even the first three lines of your Clubhouse bio should highlight and reinforce that expertise. It could be numbers, but it has to be hyper aggressive. Some people like helped 6K figures on LinkedIn or something like that, right? Or my one is like 4 times LinkedIn top voice. Another one that I helped flesh out because she didn't like the idea of like sharing monetary value or money. It's like
Yeah.
helping 1,000 entrepreneurs leverage content marketing to grow their business. So it's all about metrics because it shows results. And it so the first three line is like almost like your cred piece that you
Okay.
have to hook them in. So I call that your brand hook, your brand positioning hook. And then in your Clubhouse bio, you should expand on your story almost about what values you provide, like from a personal value, because then you want to be, hey, this is the type of person I am, and this is what I believe in. And I even shared my story there, like of how I think I shared a story about my mum because like she's like always the person that I always like start off with.
Yeah.
So, what is that story that you want to go? It's like, how deep do you want people to know you? And then
Yeah.
have a call to action. It's like, how do you can people make sure your Instagram and your Twitter DMs is connected and it reinforces your positioning as well. Because people will like look for opportunities for to distrust you or to not take you seriously. So make sure that
Yeah.
you clean up your like Instagram and your Twitter and your LinkedIn too, because people will like check you to see if you're legit or not.
Yeah.
And they will do that. They will like it's just like that dude who watched all your 4 months worth of your videos or saw your videos on the
Yeah.
constant basis. He went on your website, he went on your Instagram, he was checking you out to see if you are who you are.
Yeah, that's a really those are some really good tips. Thank you for sharing that. And you're absolutely right. What you just said is that, I think the average online user now is savvy enough to look up someone, whether it's a Google search or like you said, because you have the option to go to your Instagram and Twitter account. And for me, I feel like I've pretty much ditched Twitter nowadays. So I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook also. But you're right, it's like they'll look you up because, like you said, they want to see if you're legit, right? So like what you're telling people in your profile, and I go in deep, like bullied through high school, immigrant, all that. But at the top, I say, here's what I've done, here's my successes, because I want to lead with that value, so people understand that, hey, here's what I'm capable of. If you're serious about doing X, Y, Z, then we can do X, Y, Z. Does that make sense? But it's so
Totally.
interesting you said, and I think a lot of people don't understand that because I think I've seen some rooms on Clubhouse that people are sharing the bullshit about Clubhouse and the misrepresentation, basically, which it's like, I'm going to get that anywhere on any platform, you know?
Any platform, all platforms. It
Yeah.
just happens to be those are the rooms that are doing well because they have a really strong title
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
people want to click onto. And the moderators are smart enough to like, hey, promote this room. So
Yeah.
every person there who is doing well or who's growing there, they're doing growth hacking techniques to like leverage the audience because they feel like this audience is going to turn into a community and a
Mm-hmm.
community that could be monetized. Because it's like a audio version on LinkedIn that they should have, but they didn't know how to create because they're not product enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to segue into more like community growth because I agree with you. In fact, speaking of, in these days, I'm very selective about who I work with. And it has taken me years to really like hyper focus. But I've realized that the companies and the brands that are willing to invest, they understand that this is a long game. In fact, now more than ever, because as you know, the digital space is so saturated. And speaking of Clubhouse, over 1 million users, beta only network with the likes of Kevin Hart and Oprah and a bunch of other celebrities that are on it in invite only mode. But that's one of many other platforms, right? So let's talk about community growth. I would love to hear your thoughts because obviously you've built a community around string, right? Like a giant community that resonates with your message, resonates with who you are as a person. There's relatability, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
right? let's talk about that. Like how, what are some tips, some strategies that you've employed, and whether it's on LinkedIn or on Clubhouse or any other social platform for that matter.
So my challenge is right now, do I do a Gary Vee approach or do I go into like, the trends or hustle approach, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hustle, like, okay, big picture, real talk. You can't sell Gary Vee.
Right.
Like, hustle and the trends .vc, because they package it as a brand, you could sell that. They got acquired by HubSpot, by the way. So communities has become this asset that companies are buying now.
Which
And it's
one got acquired by HubSpot? I'm sorry.
trends.vc. You should join. It's like one of those legit. I will send you a link.
Okay.
And I'll show you what the email looks like because it's a very well written, long piece because people want to go deep. So,
Yep.
a community, what's the difference between an audience and a community? Let's go back to fundamentals first. An audience consumes, it's a one-way conversation. A
Right.
community is a multi-layered, multiverse, like
Yep.
a network. Like, it's almost like going in a room and then you know that person in that room and everyone in that room. Whereas, like, if you go for like a string approach, that one person loves me will rock up just for me. But a community rocks up for string and other people in that community and that network
Yeah.
because they want to have a multi-layered conversation and that support. And because of COVID, people have to find communities with like-minded interests
Yeah.
and missions to like support each other. So they join for the community because of that reason now. So how do you create a safe space for a thriving community? And that's where you have to like understand ego and educate your members about that
Mm.
on a regular basis as well. And I'm still practicing it out, but because like I started like talking about it on a regular basis, they started using unconsciously where if they feel like they're in a victimhood, it's like how do they pull themselves out of it? Or like even acknowledging the ego exists in the first place is a good sign, I think. And so community is, how do you grow a community on Clubhouse? Because I feel like it's different from LinkedIn where I feel like I grew an audience on LinkedIn, but on Clubhouse, I feel like I'm growing a community. So I'm waiting for me
Yeah.
to like for Clubhouse to say the trusted voice. So I could grow. I'll go growth hack it, right? Grow the community and the trusted voice, and members, paid members, will have leverage on that because they don't have the skills to
Yeah.
grow an audience, but they have expertise that I respect, and I make sure that they're the real legit people as well. So they have
Yeah.
access to the club so they could like have distribution or audience, and I'm going to pull them up and shine the light on what they have to say. My role is to give them that platform for them to shine light on what they have to say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I don't expect them to like growth hack. That's not their technique, but the years of knowledge and expertise is something that I appreciate. So I'm creating tools and these platforms for them to be the trusted voice.
Yeah. I want to go back. I'll come back to Clubhouse in a second, but I want to go back to what you said, the Gary V, because I've tried to employ that model for years now, the content marketing model specifically. And one thing that I literally I did last year that I basically last year in 2020, mind you, in this pandemic, is I literally 100% doubled on my personal brand and heavily on Instagram by just literally creating mass amounts of exposure, a lot of social video, literally. And here's what happened is so people buy you, that's a given fact. So what I figured is, okay, similar to what you were saying, is building that, growing that community in essence, which is not like a huge community, but is a community nonetheless. And by creating that exposure, it actually helped create more attraction. And as a result, it started to generate more conversations with specific people. I know, back in October of last year, we signed on a $25 million mining company out of a comment on Instagram,
Hmm.
literally, because I carried a conversation so much that after that, I was on the phone with their chief sales officer for 3 hours to the point to where my phone battery drained. And we talked and talked and talked. And then suddenly, boom, the punch came in. It was like, oh, I've been doing this, this, and this. It's not working. And really got into the marketing side of it. So I know that works. And in fact, believe it or not, I'm actually in the midst of hiring a videographer because we're actually a company of two right now, hopefully a company of three very soon, plus an investor and a videographer to literally do similar to what Gary Vee is doing by really employing the documentative approach and the
Mm-hmm.
interview style. And I'm not talking about social video, like talking on a mic right now, basically, and just spewing knowledge and value and talking about, hey, here's things that you can do, like you said, building a community. No, this is more like, a day in the life of Ivan to where like people can actually see that, father, husband, health and fitness, cyclist, like
And
really
this,
embrace that. Because what I found, String, is when people really connected on that level, I attracted health and fitness people. They're huge in it that became clients.
yes,
Attracted people that wanted to have deep conversations. So, but I think what you're saying on Clubhouse is that you're just doing that on an audio medium, which Clubhouse is just, I think it's a medium of its own now. It's
it
like
is. It
literally
is. It is.
so so interesting you said the Gary Vee model because I want to go back to that because that's literally what I mean. Last year was the first year, going over six figures, and this year looking to double or perhaps triple that revenue, especially with this investment and bringing on a full time salesperson to build an entire sales team within our company. Also, but it's interesting you said that because it goes back to what I think you did in your earlier days with Meerkat, where, like you said, people are afraid to get on camera and they're missing the boat, so to speak. They are.
They
Because,
always are. Video is actually still the platform that people are still scared of, more so than audio.
yep,
And people, and I think it'll be another, and I'm waiting for that crack to happen because why are YouTubers doing so well? But it's only like a 1 percentile of YouTubers are doing well. And there are
yeah,
many empty accounts because people just give up too easily. And it just like comes to mindset thing again. What are you doing? Like the reason that I was on Meerkat was to find myself. That's it.
and that was a
And I still,
bold move back then for you. I remember that because it was a bold move for a lot of people. I think because that was 5 years ago. Is that when Facebook Live really
yeah,
took off?
Facebook, yeah. And literally the people who succeeded was like, a, I realized when I watch people doing LinkedIn Live, and I don't think it's a good distribution channel, but I watch a lot of people and they find themselves and they're finding their voice.
Yeah,
But when we're looking for our voice, it's actually finding ourselves. And I'm going back to like, how can we leverage different platforms?
right,
And now I'm going back to the fundamental step of like, oh, we're just finding ourselves. And Ivan, you
right,
and I are ahead of the game because we just happen to be more committed to finding ourselves. But even I still go back to basics because it's like,
yeah.
do I know who I am? And I do, but am I aware about the audience? How can I connect with the audience that is more scalable now? Because Clubhouse has created this intimacy that's scalable now.
Yeah, and I was actually looking something up because you said ahead of the game. Now, believe it or not, after almost 6 years of running my business now, I feel like last year was literally like the first year that we made any leaps. We actually were able to define our core values as a brand. And one of those core values is disruption
Mm-hmm.
because I've always lived very much like you, self taught. I mean, I was that 14-year-old kid 26 years ago when we immigrated to the States that was, cranking away on a CRT monitor because my parents didn't know how to use the only computer they had in the pizza joint at the time. That was my father's first entrepreneurial endeavor. So, of course, the 14-year-old kid inherited, but that was actually one of the biggest blessings because it really introduced me to technology. Now, I think disruption, and I think you would probably agree with this because you've done this. You've always tried to find ways of how to disrupt. Meerkat was a form of disruption. When nobody was doing live video, you put yourself out there because you knew that I need to disrupt the traditional to position myself by exposing myself basically. And honestly, when I look at any successful entrepreneur, so Elon Musk, which I just heard that they dumped 1.5 billion into Bitcoin. I was like, what the fuck? But you know what? That's why Tesla is Tesla. That's why Elon Musk is a self-made billionaire. And I didn't notice that I guess this guy used to read like one book per day or does or something. Like, but that's just it. Is like if you want, and I think it goes back to communities. If you want to become the greatest version of yourself, if you want to become the best at what you maximize your potential, you need to understand that disruption is going to be a huge part of it. To disrupt the traditional of what everybody else has done. That includes getting on live video, doing a podcast, doing everything else that everybody else is not doing. So being the 1% of what the other 99% are unwilling to do.
Hmm.
And I think
That's what.
that's what you've done, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm always. I feel like an alien all the time because I feel like I'm 2 years ahead of the game. And so my role
Why?
is like, oh, and it's good because like it's only now have I been able to monetize by being an outlier and being a disruptor, right? And I get
Sure.
it. Like my role, that's why I did a startup so I could play that space. I can use that creativity where I feel like, yeah, I'm an alien. I'm cool with that. This is what you need to
Yeah.
do. Like from an alien speaking to like a human speak right now. You need to be a better human. So it's kind of interesting that I'm like going back to
Yeah.
fundamentals and it's like, what do you mean? I am a human. It's like, are you really? Are you really a good human? Are you articulating that online?
You know, I think I think you are. And in fact, I think what you've done and again, congratulations on all your success. But I personally think that all of your success is really attributed to finding out who you are, finding your voice. Like literally, and I'm not talking about set aside the bullshit marketing and business lingo. No, literally finding yourself. Like, who are you? And I think the reason I'm saying this is because I can very much resonate with what you've done because I've done that. Like I know, here's an example is 8 years ago when I started, I'm a road cyclist. So 8 years ago when I started cycling for the first 2 years, it was really just for endurance and health
Mm-hmm.
and fitness, like just to get in shape. Nowadays I cycle 70 miles per week because it's mental therapy for me. It's literally the one thing that I do to escape, especially when I have like a tough day or something. It's a good way to exhilarate. But you know what? That's finding me. And I think, like you said, in today's digital age with platforms like LinkedIn and Clubhouse and even Facebook and Instagram even or TikTok or Snapchat, whichever one, it's about really finding your voice. Like who are you? I mean, forget about authority and all that other bullshit. It's about who are you? Because at the end of the day, you want to attract other like-minded people, right? And I think most people in the social media space don't want to attract everybody and their mom because they think that that's going to give them some level of gratification, right?
Yes. I have to head off because I went overtime with our calls and it's really good. But I really, all the things that you said, like I actually went deeper and deeper, and people thought we were going to have a conversation about LinkedIn and Clubhouse. It is
Yeah.
finding yourself is what you need to do, and be
Yeah.
yourself is what you need to do.
Well, before we sign off, real quick, just tell everybody, the viewers and the listeners also, how can they connect with you, where they can find you?
I'm String Story on Clubhouse, Instagram, and also String Story on LinkedIn. But I would rather you have a conversation with me in Clubhouse right now because that's where the magic is right now. I'm always
Okay.
about trends and growth. That's where Clubhouse is, the magic.
String, thank you so much. It was so great to catch up with you, have you back, on the RAS project too. And congratulations on all your success. I'm looking forward to jumping in the convos on Clubhouse with you and anywhere else really in the digital stratosphere.
Yes, and likewise as well. I hope you get that funding because it's a different ball game when you have someone else contributing to your thing. So good luck with that because it's like a
Thank
totally
you.
different level.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. Thank